We've heard a lot this week from political commentators about the culture war and how it's just a distraction from the real issues. What about the cost of living crisis, they say? What about the disparity between rich and poor? What about the war in Ukraine? What about the global economic recovery from the pandemic? In other words, why should we care about the culture war? Isn't it just silly nonsense about pronouns and vegan sausage rolls? Isn't it just old people failing to keep up with the young and complaining about how it's all PC gone mad? Well, that's the way it's often mischaracterised, and I can understand why. A lot of the news stories that fall into the culture war bracket do seem a bit frivolous. This week, for instance, we had this article on MSN about a homophobic telescope. And obviously, this is very, very stupid stuff. We shouldn't be taking this too seriously. But this kind of thing is just one of the milder symptoms of a much more serious cultural malaise. At its heart, the culture war is an attack on our fundamental liberal values. It is a regressive movement that seeks to divide us and destabilise the foundations of our society. Still not convinced? Let's try a thought experiment. Just try to imagine yourself 15 years ago. Try to put yourself into the mindset of the person you were in 2007. Imagine back then that someone had suggested to you that in 15 years' time, police would be routinely investigating citizens in the UK for non-crime. Thousands of people a year, in fact. Or that a senior member of the government would be arguing in favour of laws to criminalise professional comedians for jokes. Or that free speech would be dismissed in the press as a right-wing talking point, and that people describing themselves as liberals would be calling for censorship. Or that activists would be demanding that statues of Winston Churchill, Mahatma Gandhi, and even slavery abolitionists like Thomas Henry Huxley should be torn down, and that those in authority would be taking them seriously. Or that major corporations would be paying a fortune for visiting speakers to berate their staff for their white privilege and telling them they should try to be less white. Or that some of the world's leading experts on race relations would be claiming that Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was actually racist, and that in promoting a dream of colourblindness, King was actually upholding white supremacy. Or that one of the most prestigious schools in London would be segregating its pupils by skin colour for after-school activities. Or that a school district in Canada would be burning thousands of books because the contents are offensive to modern sensibilities, and that they would refer to this as a flame purification ceremony. Or that a film aimed at young people on the BBC would be telling children that there are over 100 genders, and teachers throughout the country would be doing the same. Or that politicians would stumble and stutter when asked, "What is a woman?" and be unable to answer the question. Or that woman would become a dirty word, and that companies, charities, media outlets, and even some factions of the NHS would be favouring phrases like menstruators, bleeders, and people with a cervix. Or that a man would be nominated for Woman of the Year. Or that male rapists would be identifying as female and be moved to women's prisons where they would go on to commit further sexual assaults. Or that healthy teenage girls would be encouraged by health professionals to get double mastectomies, and that young effeminate boys would be told that they are actually probably girls and that they should be put on medication to halt puberty. Or that the head of Stonewall, the charity that has done so much for gay rights, would be referring to lesbians who don't want to include men in their dating pool as sexual racists and comparing them to anti-Semites. Or that reputable medical journals would be denying biological reality, claiming that sex isn't binary at all, but that it's a spectrum. Or that women would be fired from their jobs and subject to threats of death and rape online for saying that biological sex is real. If 15 years ago you'd have been told that this was what the future would look like, would you have believed any of it? You would have laughed. You would have said, none of those things can possibly happen in a free and liberal and sane society. And they all did. Here we are. And it won't stop here. Think about how quickly all of this has happened. If only 15 years ago nobody would have believed that any of this stuff could possibly happen, then where does that take us in another 15 years? Because all these people who are saying that the culture war doesn't matter, that we need to focus on real issues, I wonder whether they'll be saying the same thing in 2037 when all of this nonsense has escalated 100-fold. Those who say that the culture war is a distraction, or that these are just fringe concerns, are effectively saying that free speech doesn't matter, that women's rights don't matter, that gay rights don't matter. They're effectively saying that it's fine if some women are sexually assaulted because of the dismantling of women's spaces, that it's fine to teach children an ideology whose logical endpoint is segregation by skin colour, that it's fine to have gay kids medicalised, that it's fine for people to be arrested for the words they choose to say, that it's fine for academics and the media to lie to us, so long as it's for our own good. And that all of this is just the price we pay for progress. They also claim that the culture war is just the old failing to adapt to the values of the young, but this is not true. A recent report by the More in Common initiative estimates that the kind of people who are supporting these radical shifts in our society represent a mere 13% of the population. In other words, they are a minority in all generations. In fact, some of the most vehement pushback against this ideology is coming from Generation Z, those born between 1997 and 2012. And some of the most vocal social justice activists are well into middle age. The problem is that activists and their cheerleaders have mistaken change for progress. But eroding the values of a liberal democracy, trashing the rights of women and gay people, undermining free speech, teaching children to see each other first and foremost in terms of their skin colour, that's not progress. It's just change. And we need to understand the difference. So yes, we should address the cost of living crisis, global conflicts, all those other key issues. But we need to take on the culture warriors too, because they're not on the fringes anymore. They occupy powerful positions in all of our major institutions. They are dominant, they have the momentum, and they are making drastic changes to our society that will eventually spell the death of social liberalism. So you can say this is a distraction, all you like. But if you ignore the culture warriors, they won't disappear, they'll win. And if you think things are crazy now, imagine the future they've got in store for us.